I'm Chris Motes, and this is Faith in Politics. On this broadcast, we range from the soul to the state as we cultivate those virtues and explore those principles that help us live well as faithful Catholics in this great land. Welcome back for another episode, folks. So happy to be broadcasting from the great state of South Dakota, where under God the people rule. Gosh, I just love living here, and so grateful we've been getting plenty of rain lately. My dry, parched lawn is actually green again, if you can believe it. So praise God for that. And I know the farmers are happy to be getting all that beautiful, beautiful rain too. And I think, in fact, we could keep using it. So Lord, keep it coming. Folks, today we're going to step back into a really important topic. We've talked about it on the show before, but we're going to talk about it again because it's frankly just that important. Really pleased to welcome to the show today, Kat Talalis. Catherine goes by Kat Talalis, is the Associate Director for Communications at the Pro-Life Secretariat at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. That was a mouthful. Kat, tell me if I got it wrong, and welcome to the show.
You got it right. Kat Talalis is correct. Thank you so much for having me on.
So glad to have you. And we're going to talk about HIDE because you are you're sort of the communications expert for the pro-life folks there at the conference. And this is I can't emphasize enough just like how important, and everybody needs to know about what's happening with HIDE right now. And it's, even for like a policy person, it can be a bit difficult to like wrap your head around. So I just, even if it's repetitive from, we had one of your colleagues on in the past, Greg Schleppenbach, we're going to keep talking about it. Before we launch into that though, like, who's this Kat Talalis person? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Sure. So I'm from a little town in Spring Lake, New Jersey, which is right on the coast in Monmouth County, New Jersey. I'm a small town girl. I moved to DC about 7 years ago, and initially was working actually as a journalist, and then I transitioned into working on the Hill. And then I worked for a women's nonprofit for a little while before having the opportunity to work for the church, which has been what a blessing to get to serve the church, especially serve the church in its sharing the truth about the gospel of life. So I feel incredibly blessed. I've been here for about 2 years. So I feel very lucky to be able to do this work every day with such wonderful people.
And just like kind of mentioning like the truth, that's something we've talked about this show before too, just like the splendor and beauty of truth, and what a beautiful thing. So can you, I'm going to spring this one on you. Like, why are you Catholic, Kat?
Why am I Catholic? That's a great question. By the grace of God. I mean, that's the simple answer. I was born, and raised in the Catholic Church. Although I think for a lot of people, suburban catechesis isn't always great. So there are a lot of things that I didn't really know about the faith that my parents didn't really know, even because of the way that they were catechized or not catechized, growing up. And so I really always was open to God and loved Jesus, believed in God, and had a relationship with God, even went to Sunday Mass. But there's a lot that I just didn't know about the Catholic Church until I went to college. And it was through the Catholic Campus Ministry at Rutgers University, which is my undergraduate university, where I met this wonderful group of Catholics, and where God found me in the presence of the Eucharist. It was, we all have our stories, I think, of us reverts, right? I was kind of almost like an evangelical New Age Christian, I think, in high school. And until I went to college, when I met this wonderful group of Catholics and experienced the real presence of God in the Eucharist, and just the sacramental grace that comes through that, and through that everything else followed. So I feel very blessed.
Can you look back and identify like a moment in time?
Absolutely.
Tell me about it.
So when my second year of college, I was just battling between many different identities, I guess. I think that a lot of people experience this who come from small towns. When they go to college, they have a chance to be whoever they want to be. Yeah. And all these doors opened up for me. I was in student government. I did theater. I was being, rushed by a few sororities. I had a million friends all over campus, all kinds of opportunities that I was involved with. Yet my faith became even more interesting. And the Catholics I met were just very compelling people. And then right around that time, two of my friends, very sudden from high school, and a friend's younger brother suddenly passed away. very unexpectedly. And I found out that my dear friend, of the two, I had one that I was particularly close to, and I found out that she had passed away when I had just unpacked my bags on a Catholic retreat. And so I was really forced to confront the reality of my friend's death with nothing but my Bible, a journal, a rosary, and a bunch of awesome Catholics and some great priests. And, I couldn't run from it. I had to confront it right there and then.
Wow.
And I felt an interior movement, or an interior voice saying very clearly to me that it's time to start living your life for real. And I knew that that meant the sacramental life, something that I had kind of been dancing around, really participating in the sacraments, doing a real confession, receiving the Eucharist in a state of grace, these things that I had kind of not been really ready for. And by God's grace, the next day after I found out about my friend's death, I had an incredible experience in confession with a wonderful priest of our Catholic campus ministry, where the Holy Spirit just sort of took out all the words from the past years, and I was able to experience that. And then for right after that, I was able to spend time in adoration. This is all late at night, and I remember when I came into adoration right after confession, and it was just me and the Eucharist and this little chapel lit by candles. And I felt like all the love in the world was just embracing me. It was this moment where I felt so utterly loved and so found. And it changed my life. And that tremendous love inspired everything else. I never wanted to go back. I never wanted to go back to my old life. So that's the story. That's the moment.
Well, I'm glad that we're only using our audio and not our video, because our listeners can't see me crying right now. You've already broken the one rule on this podcast, which is guests aren't allowed to make the hosts cry. It's so beautiful, just the extent of God's love. So,
Absolutely.
It's so wonderful.
Absolutely.
I just want to take.
I want to ask you now, but I don't.
Hey, this is my podcast. Okay, I do want to get to Hyde. Maybe we can come back and.
Sure. Okay.
Let's talk a little bit of Hyde, because Hyde's going to make me cry too, but not tears of joy, tears of just grief for our country.
Yes.
So I'm grieving over what's happening with the Hyde Amendment right now, because I'm a lawyer and a policy person, and I understand like what actually is significant in this. Do you mind just giving folks an overview, if maybe they haven't heard the material in the past, or they've heard it, but maybe like, okay, what's so important about this?
Sure.
Just give us some of the details, like what's happening.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's so interesting because I feel like pro-life people, they may have heard the phrase, the Hyde Amendment, but they don't know what it is. Should I be for it? Should I be against it? And I don't blame them, it can be confusing. So just to clear up, when we're talking about the Hyde Amendment going away, we're talking about taxpayer-funded abortion becoming a reality.
Yeah.
So the Hyde Amendment is what protects against taxpayer funding of abortions. The Hyde Amendment is a rider, meaning that it is something that Congress basically puts into law every year as a tag along to any appropriations bills. So whenever we fund the government, we have these riders that say that these dollars that are going to fund our government cannot go to pay for elective abortion. And the Hyde Amendment is what does that. It's the rider that says that. So every single year for 45 years, all Republicans and Democrats have voted for an appropriations bill that includes the Hyde Amendment. This year, even though the Hyde Amendment has very broad support, the overwhelming majority of Americans support this, including an overwhelming majority of low-income women, especially women of color, support the Hyde Amendment. These kind of radical, politicians and powerful politicians in Congress have decided to attack the Hyde Amendment and to take it out of the appropriations bill that has been drafted, and to get rid of any protection against taxpayer-funded abortion.
And just for folks that don't know all the ins and outs of like a budgeting process, how did this originate? Like, where does the budget come from?
So the budget initially usually comes from committees. So Congress there are all these committees, right? And the Labor, Health, and Human Services Committee is the one that we're concerned about when it comes to Hyde. And this committee is a group of lots of different Congress people from both sides of the aisle who come together to put together a draft bill. And often that draft bill is somewhat, depending on who's in power, right? Which majority party and which president is influenced by the president's budget. Now, President Biden removed the Hyde Amendment from his budget, which was a surprise. We weren't necessarily expecting that. It's a very bold move, especially as he supported the Hyde Amendment in the past. And then so perhaps taking their cue from President Biden, or just based on things that a lot of these ranking members of this committee have said in the past, they decided that Labor, Health and Human Services Committee decided to not include the Hyde Amendment rider, and also not include the Weldon Amendment, which protects against, conscience rights, which protects for conscience rights, I should say, protects the conscience rights of doctors and healthcare organizations that don't want to offer abortion. They got rid of the Hyde Amendment and they got rid of the Weldon Amendment. And that's how this, was kicked off, right? They signaled that our bill is not going to include these things. So that's where we are.
And you mentioned President Biden. When he was on the campaign trail, I know his campaign website indicated that he was now opposed to the Hyde Amendment, which at that time was really shocking. He had, has a long career in the United States Senate, always supported it. Apparently had some sort of evolution on the issue. But even then, to follow through on that campaign indication was still like a whole new level of shock, I think. And you're right. When we talk about government funding of abortions, I know there are lots of different, they call them riders. It's like these little attachments that get thrown onto a big bill. Right. So we've got Hyde, we've got Weldon, we've got Church, we've got Helms, we've got Dornan. And the Hyde was the first, and then right after Hyde, we see these other ones start to tip over too. When we talk about government funding for abortion with Hyde, what is the government program that we're talking about?
Great question. We're talking about, Medicare, Medicaid.
Okay.
And this is where it gets interesting, because the Hyde Amendment doesn't just mean that our federal tax dollars will go to pay for abortion. It means that states will effectively be forced to pay for abortion in order to be included in the federal Medicaid program.
Can you say that one more time?
Sure.
Who's going to be? Yeah.
States, your state tax dollars, in addition to your federal tax dollars, even if you're in a pro-life state, will go to pay for abortions and Medicaid if your state wants to stay included in the Medicaid program, which most states do, right? We want little poor kids to be able to get health care. Sure. And we shouldn't have to pay for elective abortion in order to make sure that, little kids with disabilities or who come from poor families should be able to get health care, right? Or that vulnerable people should be able to get health care. So this is really, Hyde is especially egregious, because people who have said, in my state, we don't want to pay for abortions. We'll be compelled to pay for abortions through their state tax dollars and their federal tax dollars.
And that's certainly the case for South Dakota too. We've got a state statute that prohibits taxpayer dollars from going to fund abortions. Because of the supremacy clause in the federal constitution. This federal law would then kind of trump our state law, and we would be forced to pay for abortions. That's concerning at a couple of levels. First and foremost, for just our own conscience as taxpayers, like, we don't want any part of this. It seems like such a tyrannical imposition, if I can speak boldly.
Yes.
The other thing that's, of course, really important, we can look at data. So in South Dakota, in recent years, we've had in the upper 300s or low 400s in terms of abortion per year at one of 3 registered abortion facilities in the state of South Dakota: Planned Parenthood, Sanford Health, and Monument Health. This last year, because of COVID, it was down to like 150. But I think I saw some data out there, Kat, that indicated that states that currently fund abortions, through their own dollar contributions to their state Medicaid programs, the abortion rate per childbearing woman in those states is like 4 times higher than in.
I absolutely believe it. I haven't seen that exact statistic, but I believe that's where the estimation that the Hyde Amendment has saved 2.5 million lives since it was enacted in the 70s, partly because of this, because we're able to look at the difference in abortion when it is funded, right, versus when it is not. And it makes sense, because if you're a woman, you're a vulnerable woman, and the state is offering to pay for your abortion, but they're not offering you a safe apartment to live in to get away from your abusive boyfriend. Right. They're not offering, a beautiful job for you to attend. They're not offering all of the food and all of the education and the resources and the medical care that your children need. They're not offering all of that, right? They're not giving you a life where you can welcome your children, but they're offering you a free abortion. They're offering to end the life of your child for free.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I mean, we know that for the overwhelming majority of women who get abortions, 86% are unmarried.
Yeah.
3/4 of them are low income.
Yeah.
So these are women who are in a very difficult spot. They do not have the relational support of, of a family, of a spouse. Most of the time, they do not have the financial support that goes with that. And often they themselves don't have a very, high income level.
Yeah.
So these are the women who are getting abortions. If the state is offering to take care of it, supposedly, right, take care of it as an end the life of their child, a woman in desperate circumstances is going to see that vote of no confidence.
Yes.
And is going to receive that supposed out, right, of her terrifying situation and take it. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
And you hear on the pro-abortion side, they say, well, it's like, it's somehow it's discriminatory to like not offer free abortions to low-income women. And I'm just thinking, like, how discriminatory is it to respond to a crisis pregnancy with the offer of violence? This is all I have for you. This is what I have for you is violence in the womb.
Absolutely.
Because you're poor. My goodness.
Because clearly you don't have what it takes to support this child. So here's a free abortion. I mean, you're right. It's violence that they're being offered. And to offer a woman a free abortion, but not the resources that she needs to care for her child and welcome them in love, is not choice, but coercion.
Yeah.
It is a form of coercion.
Yeah, that's so well put. It's one of the things too I think about as we're grappling with this issue now. I don't know if many people know necessarily about it. And one of the things I'm wondering is if just like over time, through politics, we like just kind of shift the window, as they put it, move the Overton window. Is there a danger that our hearts become numb to what's happening? Did you ever experience this or see it out there, or what do you think about this?
What I see more than a numbness to the issue, because I think that pro-lifers are actually stronger than ever in terms of the people who believe that abortion should be illegal, is still the majority of Americans. What I do see in terms of a numbness is their confidence in the government and in democracy and in their own voice mattering. And so what ends up happening is that they're not politically active. They don't call their congressman because they feel like it won't make a difference. They don't write an op-ed if like the liberal media is biased against them or something. And look, there is some truth to some of that, in that there are some congressmen and women who you're not going to necessarily change their mind because you call in. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, I mean, I worked for Congress, right? I was a staffer in a congressional office. And I can tell you that every communication that you have with a member of Congress is recorded. They put it down. And even if they're pro-choice, if they see the majority of their district is against something, they might go to their leadership, right? Their Nancy Pelosi's or, whoever, and say, hey, this bill's really unpopular and we want to get reelected, right? So can we do something else? And that's the reality. These politicians, they want to get reelected. Yeah. And so you have to continue to raise your voice. You have to be the squeaky wheel. I know for me, my congressman, there were some issues that he was on the fence about, right? Yeah. And where he wasn't sure whether to, vote with his party or not. And so he would say, hey, how many people have called in about this issue? And I would tell him. And sometimes that would be the deciding thing that would have him support something or not, or go to his leadership. He was a Republican, but his leadership and say, hey, this is unpopular. And it's especially, as Catholics, right? We have a nuanced worldview. Yes. And so I think that when we can have unique relationships with our congressperson of both parties and help them to understand Catholic social teaching, right? And what their Catholic constituents think. Yeah. So when you say numbness, I do see numbness, but not to the issues. People are just riled up on Facebook and, and on Twitter and, they're talking to their friends and they're reading increasingly polarized media. So people are, I think, awake to it, right? But it's their political motivation that has gone numb.
So we really want to be able to help give people a voice, help them exercise their voice. Yes. And I know the USCCB has organized a really beautiful petition drive. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. So we have this no taxpayer abortion website, notaxpayerabortion.com, where we have a petition, and that petition will go to all members of Congress. It'll go to Congress, and we will also, through that petition, be able to direct you to your members of Congress. So when you sign your name to the petition at notaxpayerabortion.com, not only will your name go to Congress, but you will also be directed to your members of Congress, because we know that Congress is interested. Yes, they're interested if they know that 1 million Americans are for the Hyde Amendment. That's interesting, right? What's really interesting to individual members of Congress and to leadership is how many constituents are against something. So if you can contact the congressman who represents you in your district, right?
Yeah.
Or the senator who represents you in your state, both, that has a particular weight. As I said before,
Sure.
They really do write down every communication is recorded in their system with a constituent.
Yeah.
So the No Taxpayer Abortion website, once you sign your name to the petition, you'll also be directed to your congressman and be able to share your voice with them directly too.
That's awesome. And so for us in South Dakota, we have 3 people in our congressional delegation. We
Yes.
have 1 representative, 1 district state. So Senator John Thune on the floor of the Senate the other week gave a brilliant speech defending Hyde. We know where he's at.
Yes.
Congressman Johnson just sent out a really nice email the other day to kind of a big public email in defense of Hyde. We know Senator Rounds on the record defending Hyde. These are all pro-life folks. Is it still important for us to reach out even though we know where they are?
That is a great question, and the answer is absolutely. These Congress people need to be thanked for their support, because it is not always easy to stick your neck out on this issue. I find that this issue, more than almost any other, people are very intimidated to stick their neck out on it, even Republicans. And also, frankly, the pro-life members of Congress who we already know are pro-life, they need the encouragement. I worked, again, on the Hill, and it was a great encouragement to me as a staffer and to the whole staff and to our congressmen as well, to see thank yous, or also just to see these people are in favor of this thing, because then we get to send them a letter and say, hey, thank you for emailing us. We support this. We're with you. And we get to develop that relationship with people who are like-minded and in our state. So it is a really important thing to continue to do that. It'll also, again, South Dakota might be able to tell their leadership to keep fighting for Hyde, to make this the priority, right?
Yeah.
Here at the USCCB, we have said that abortion is the preeminent priority.
Yes.
But right now in conservative media, for example, even conservative media, much less media that is on maybe the other side, when it comes to abortion, you see a lot of, I guess, apathy, or you don't see as much of this in the news recently. And there are a lot of reasons why that might be, but what we're seeing is that unless it's like a pro-life specific news site, we don't see a lot about abortion in the media, really on either side, especially when it comes to protecting the Hyde Amendment. So it's super important to make sure your Congress people, your representatives know that this is an issue to you.
Those are all really great points. I just, with Senator Thune's really amazing speech on the floor of the Senate the other week, I know Governor Noem, just because this, as we talked about, this has serious state level policy implications. Governor Noem did a nice little video on social media highlighting this issue, but to my knowledge, I have not seen anything in our state newspapers. I've not seen anything in our state television. So I think this is one of those issues that it's like actually really important that we just like talk about amongst ourselves.
Exactly.
Share it on social media, share it at the dinner table, share it with your friends. Like, do you know this is happening? What do you think about that? And just the importance of I love how you just mentioned, absolutely. You got to reach out, even though you know where they're at, and say thank you. That's something I do all the time, where I'm, just touching base with a staffer, just saying, hey, I just saw this come up. Thanks so much. Doing great work. Praying for you and your team. I've never,
it's true, because I can guarantee you that staffer, for every one positive call they get 9 people screaming at them, and that's reality of working in a congressional office. So it's really important, I think, to the morale of people who are trying to, fight the good fight, and it's an uphill battle, to say, you're on the right track. Thanks for doing this.
And even just like outside of the policy, like trying to exercise some political influence here. like it's this joyful encouragement. It's oftentimes with strangers, maybe you don't know them, that really evangelizes.
Yes.
Like
Oh, yes.
I'm praying maybe somebody listening to your testimony earlier is like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, like holy buckets, that's so good. And,
Right.
just to like share who we are through the joy of our communications even.
That's a
So
great point. Yeah, because frankly, to this, I didn't get to mention this, but when you contact your congressman, again, everything we do is recorded.
mm,
And that has a lot of implications, right? You are in many ways a witness for the pro-life movement. So it's so important to make your communications, even though we're talking about a serious issue, even though you might be very angry with your representative, if you're outside of South Dakota, or if you're in a more unfriendly state when it comes to pro-life, to be respectful and
yeah,
to say what you believe, but to do it in a very respectful way, because you are speaking to a real person on the other end of that phone.
yeah,
And it says a lot about the pro-life movement, the way that we communicate with people who disagree with us.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
we have to do
Absolutely.
it in a way that shows respect, and that shows a true desire to impart information, and to do it again, to speak the truth in love. That's what we're called
Amen.
to do as Christians, right? We're not
Amen.
called to castigate people and
Yeah.
to be so clever and own the other side, and all
Yeah.
these trends that we see on social
Yeah.
media, are very polemical, which has its place, right? It can be important too sometimes, but for the, we're called to be Christ to the
Yeah.
world. And
Amen.
how do we think that Jesus would share this information with others, and try to have that as our guide?
Yeah, that's a great point. And as we kind of come to the end of our time, we've got a minute left here. I think it's so important that even on a politics podcast, like just to actually claim the name of Christ and what we're doing.
Amen.
In our minute left, what do you any final parting thoughts here in the last 30 seconds?
I would say that the most important thing is to pray
Ah,
for the lives of unborn children and their mothers, to pray for our leaders, pray to St. Michael the Archangel for your own spiritual protection as you seek to do pro-life work,
oh wow.
and Our Lady's Rosary, and know that her Immaculate Heart has triumphed and Christ has the victory. And so
Ah,
we are here to be foot soldiers for Christ, but the victory is already ours.
Kat, you're coming back on this show sometime. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for helping get out the word about the Hyde Amendment.
Thank you so much. Take care, and God bless all of you.
You too. God bless you, dear listeners. Thanks as always for listening in. It's great to be with you. If you've got comments, questions, critiques, what do you want to hear about? Reach out. Go to the website, sdcatholicconference.org. You can click Contact Us. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, maybe give us a little rating on that podcast platform too. And share with friends. Until next time, live well.